Welcome to the Headley Highlight Show's Uplifting Corner. The Uplifting Corner is a weekly section of my show where I kind of highlight something that's meaningful or can be inspiring or motivational or something that gives you a bit of wisdom or a bit of pause for thought. And this week's contribution is to do with a very special person. So October is Black History Month in the UK. So during this month, I'm honouring some inspirational and pioneering Black women who have forged paths in this country for people like myself to follow. And this week, I'm honouring a hero of mine, and her name is Claudia Jones. Now, before I jump all over my Uplifting Corner with Claudia Jones, please do one of the following things. Hit the bell notification and select all. You'll have to press it twice because once you do subscribe, it doesn't say necessarily all. So select all if you have the opportunity. Become a subscriber to DeniseHeadley.com at my website or on my YouTube. I have 2,100 and somebody, I think 160 subscribers. I'm nearly getting to 2,200, so it's coming. It takes its time, but please do assist if you can. Also, like, comment and share, and also if you can, do make a donation, because I am very, very, very partial to 3 wings and chips and a Miranda or a bit of Bitcoin. Now let's jump all over this week's Uplifting Corner. Claudia Jones was a fearless journalist, a political organizer, and a pioneering voice in Black radical thought, yet her name is rarely mentioned in history books or the mainstream media. Born in Trinidad, and shout out to all my Trinis in the house, in 1915, and immigrating to the United States with their parents at the age of 8, Claudia grew up to become one of the most influential and overlooked voices in the American civil rights history. Raised in Harlem during the height of the resistance, Claudia was an observant student of injustice. Her family faced poverty, and she personally battled TB as a teenager, a disease which is worsened by poor housing and healthcare. But even illness could not dim her sharp intellect and Claudia's sense of justice. So in the 1930s, as fascism grew in Europe and racial inequality deepened in the US, Jones joined the Communist Party in the USA. She believed that radical oppression and economic exploitation were interconnected, and isn't that the truth? A radical position at the time, she rose quickly in the party, becoming editor of the Communist Party newspaper for African Americans entitled The Weekly Review. Her most famous contribution came in a 1949 essay entitled An End to the Neglect of the Problems of the Negro Woman. In it, Claudia made a groundbreaking argument that Black women faced triple oppression of race, class, and gender. Does that sound like intersectionality to you guys? Sounds like it to me, but it's just a different way of describing it. And this could be the center of any liberation movement. This idea was decades ahead of its time, planting early seeds for what would later be known as intersectional feminism. However, her politics made her a target, and during the anti-communism period in the USA, Claudia, unsurprisingly, was arrested and jailed under the Smith Act for her activism in 1955. She was deported from the USA to the United Kingdom, a country she barely knew. It didn't stop her fight against racial injustice. In London, she continued her advocacy, founding the West Indian Gazette, the first major Black newspaper in Britain, and sadly that's no longer here. In 1959, she organised a Caribbean festival in St. Pancras Town Hall, an event which evolved into the Notting Hill Carnival, which is now one of the largest street festivals in Europe. Claudia used her platform to support decolonization movements, Black British identity, and cultural pride. In 1964, Claudia tragically died, and she was only 49 years old. She's buried in Highgate Cemetery, London, next to Karl Marx, a symbol of her lasting impact on global social justice movements. Despite her profound influence on black liberation, women's rights and anti-imperial movements, her name is not well recognised as it ought to be, which is not unusual because invariably as black women, we are always seen as less than, not as important as, much smaller, and our contributions are deemed less when in fact they are gargantuan. However, in recent years, scholars and activists have begun to rediscover Claudia's writings, her speeches and her vision. Her life reminds us that the fight for justice is often led by those history tries its hardest to forget. That's the same with life though, don't you think? That often life reminds you that the people who you do not see as being the most valuable, they're the most easy to forget. They actually are the most impactful. Claudia Jones didn't just challenge the system, she reimagined it, and through her voice and through her activism, and even though they tried to silence her, these echoes are still heard in today's movements for racial and gender equality, especially around black women, because let's not forget the whole Me Too movement. White feminism has traditionally forgotten black women and indigenous women. Claudia Jones has now been honoured by English Heritage, and a blue plaque in her name has been placed on her former home in Vauxhall in the borough of Lambeth. Now, when I was looking at this particular Uplifting Corner, I was really intrigued to share information about Claudia Jones because I grew up in Hackney, and there was a place in Hackney in Stoke Newington Road and always said Claudia Jones Centre. And going back in the day, I remember my parents were very much involved in activism, sit-ins for racial equality, justice and fairness. And I remember, I think, going to the Claudia Jones Centre. This is donkeys ago, I'm talking like 40 summers ago, or possibly even 50 summers ago. But the point is, I knew about her in my youth as growing up. And as my parents were very, you would these days call them Pan-Africanists, yeah? But they were very much involved in politics, and they were very clear about, their identity and what their children should be growing up to thinking and that sort of thing. And you're not to be Anglo-sized and Afro and Eurocentric in our perspectives. And I always remember Claudia Jones, the centre, and all of the activities that would be conducted in and around that centre and in and around those buildings in Hackney. Because back in those days, there was a significant number of Caribbeans in Hackney, and they had a lot of community social infrastructure. And I think today, the only piece of social community infrastructure that still stands as a testament to some of the work that we did with people, I didn't know her obviously, but people who are working in the centre, is the Claudia Jones Centre. It's still there. I think it's still there anyway. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed that Uplifting Corner with that little extra anecdote of my personal involvement with the Claudia Jones Centre. And come back next week. Don't forget to make a donation. Yeah, don't forget to do that. I'm very partial to free wings and chips and also a piece of Bitcoin. And in addition to that, come back next week. Thank you for your listening ear, and cut.